Welcome to On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Coming up for discussion on our Viewpoints panel. The Tories have pledged funding to religious schools if elected in October. Later on, we'll be talking about care for the elderly. Stay tuned. And these are the issues we'll be presenting today to our Viewpoints guests for commentary. The Ontario Conservatives have pledged funding for faith-based schools if elected into power this fall. Get ready, the aging population is set to radically alter the political, economic, and social landscape. And thousands of offspring of Nazi Holocaust survivors in Israel are seeking compensation from Germany for psychiatric treatment. Later on, we'll be talking about care for the elderly. But first, let's meet our Viewpoints guests. Robert Metz is president of the Freedom Party, and Anita Bromberg is legal counsel for B'nai B'rith Canada. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
First topic we're looking at, here it goes. Tory pledges funding for religious schools. Now, according to other commentaries that followed, and I'm not going to deny that, this could become a major election platform. I wouldn't say coming up closer to the fall. It already is a big issue, has been for some time, and you're hearing from one side that it could be a great thing for the Tories. You're hearing on the other side it could be a bad thing, and somewhere in between, well, I heard both parties, the Tories and the Grits, referred to as Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and perhaps this is the one issue that differentiates them. Not quite sure if I agree with that, but I'm going to start with you on this one, Anita.
Sure.
Are you in support of funding for religious schools?
Oh, absolutely. It's been cited already by the UN, for example, as you know, a basis of discrimination, against discrimination. I'm for multiculturalism that respects the rights of every community, treats them all equally. Educating a community along their cultural lines is fundamental to a multicultural community. And I think there's a way of integrating it into the existing system without taking away from the public system. I think that the issues that are raised can be dealt with.
Now, Anita, before I go on to you, there's an issue that came up not long ago in Hamilton, and we covered this issue on the second part of our program, that there's been a drive to stop funding for Catholic schools, to amalgamate them under one public system. And the argument here is that the public system is already starved of funding, and we need to look after the interests of that public system, which is virtually secular and seen as a system for all, everybody falling under one umbrella. This has a tendency to throw that a little bit out the window in terms of where are these funds going to come from? How do you perhaps believe?
There's 2 points I'd like to make as briefly as I could. One is a recognition that the public school system is not completely secular. There's a viewpoint bias that's built into the system, and it doesn't necessarily always accommodate those different religious points of view.
You're talking a secular point of view.
Well, I challenge
secular
the concept
humanist?
that, you know, you have the holiday, at holiday times, what holidays are celebrated.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
I mean, there's larger issues around that. As far as the funding, people that have analyzed it, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but they show that we're talking about a very small percentage of the population. It doesn't, if structured properly, it doesn't have to take away from the public school system, which obviously has major issues.
Yes. Robert, how do you feel about this one?
Well, for me, of course, the bigger picture is I'm outside the box because I don't believe government should be funding any kind of education in the sense of running the curriculum. You don't believe in the
universality of that?
I believe in universal education, but you pay your own, and the government only help the people who can't pay for themselves. I don't believe in the institutionalized approach of funding. If the issue is one of need, of money to get to school, whatever your school is, that should be your own choice. The government can help you then, and then you pay that back at some point because of your education. But it just strikes me that government funding of religious schooling is almost a contradiction in terms. You're going to destroy whatever religion was left there because listen to what they're talking about. The reason they want to do this is to manage religious diversity within the system.
Yes.
And essentially what they're going to do is water down whatever belief systems are there, which some people think is a good thing. Okay, that's not the issue here, but that's a consequence of this, I believe. And I think there's a broader, almost a religious question, a moral one certainly, and that's how can you, if you are of a belief that, for example, thou shalt not steal, how do you accept someone else's money to fund your beliefs and your cause when perhaps they don't share those beliefs and causes? To me, that's what the government should not be doing, above all, because that's going to create the very divisions that they think they're avoiding by being all-inclusive and all that. That's what you see around the world, is everyone's fighting for government money, and it comes out as a religious debate.
You see, Robert, just listening to you, it makes the whole thing, legitimately so, sound like it can be potentially quite confusing. My major concern in all this is the methodology. How is this going to be done? Now, yes, go ahead.
But there are models that are existing now. A lot of the, most of the religious schools in the Jewish community, for instance, already are following a set curriculum by the Ontario government. They incorporate it into their day. A portion of the day is reserved for religious education. They make up for it by expanding the school hours. Most of the costs are paid by the parents. There is some assistance from the community in subsidies. Why shouldn't, if the majority of students are getting public funding, and your answer is
I don't think two wrongs make a right. I just don't believe that for a second. And because we're already doing it, I mean, Ontario has had faith-based education to varying degrees since Confederation. Tory said, well, that doesn't justify it. I mean, we had a lot of horrible things in history.
That's it. The bottom line is where we disagree is that I think there should be a public education system. There's all kinds of functions that a public education system carries out in terms of socializing, creating a Canadian mentality, and which
so
is
you don't
a major
believe in choice in education? You
no, I believe in choice, but I can see fitting into a public system for the values that it can bring to the system, but to the school day. But I also believe
so if I don't want to support that public system either through taxation or by attendance, what would my penalty be, or would there be a penalty?
You don't want to send your kids to that system?
Well, a big question here.
Just a general question.
Where is that money coming from in terms of how much will be funded by the public system, if you want to look at it that way? Yes. How much of the government money is going to go into the religious schools? You see, these are big questions that I don't really see answered yet.
It's not a question from the point of view of those that are seeking funding for religious education to take away from anybody. They're simply saying we're taxpayers.
Yes. And that I can't argue with.
Right? And why shouldn't our kids...
Argue with
I can't argue with that. No, I can't argue with that. The reason why is I agree with what you were saying, Anita, from the point of view of if you look at the public system, now your argument might be different than mine. There tends to be certain rules that get portrayed. I mean, even now, you have certain values that go into the public school system. And I'm not going to beat around the bush. You've got books in libraries now where a kindergarten kid could get a hold of that talks about same-sex unions as being an alternative way of living. Many people of religious value do not stand for this. This is something completely abhorrent to them, and it's their right to feel so. However, it's not their right, and I'm not promoting this whatsoever, hate and putting down somebody else.
About other religions too.
Well, they may, exactly. But what I'm saying is, this is not a country that promotes hate. That is not the issue here. We're looking at an education system in a democracy where people are diverse, and there needs to be some way to look at a system where everybody's point of view could be somehow respected. And maybe the problem is, how do you do so in a logical fashion?
You pay your own way. Done.
In every school, to every school.
Look, if you want brown shoes and I want black shoes,
so how many schools do you have?
Buy them
but how many schools do you have?
However,
under this system, under your system, what would it look like, Robert? What would it look like, logically speaking?
I think you'd still have public schools. I think you'd have more private schools, but people would choose where their education dollar goes, whether that's a personal dollar, a tax dollar, or whatever. But the main issue is that it shouldn't be a tax dollar to the greatest degree. We've got a healthcare system that's floundering because it hasn't got enough money. We've got a welfare system that's... It all comes from the same pocket. But that's the problem, is that every new scheme, like the NDP want to bring in universal dental care. Let's add that to the list.
Would it end up being a whole bunch of private schools, yet if you can't afford it, it ends up being publicly funded? Is that the kind of a system you're looking at? Like, who's going to build these schools? Because it's very costly.
You see, when you're looking at a system, we have a varied system today. There's all kinds of schools out there, except that the parents who are forced to pay taxes to the public school system, if they want to send their kids to a school that's specialized either on a faith-based, and I wonder why we're not even talking about non-faith-based schools. What about schools that just deal in science and math and mechanics and don't have any of those other issues, but those aren't even brought up for some reason? So,
because we're trying to rectify our human right violation is where we're bottom line. That's why we're focusing on
I think we're causing a
religious
violation by, the taxpayer, his rights are being violated.
See, that's where we disagree.
That's where the disagreement comes in.
I think the taxpayers.
Do you know why we have education and public education
say.
in Ontario? You know why? Lieutenant Governor John Simcoe from London, Ontario, brought in public education because of the American threat. That was what it was all about.
You know what? We got to go for a break because we have two other topics to talk about, but we've got a major logistics issue here.
That's for sure.
That's coming out loud and clear. We're going to go for a break now. When we come back, well, get ready. The seniors are going to change our landscape politically, socially, and economically. We'll be discussing it after the break. Stay tuned.